Well, happy July 4th, everybody. It's Weather Wagers. Brett Thacker, Dave Shiner with you. Dan Tomaso, one more week before
One more. We get the guy back eventually here?
I think he's going to try to zoom in next week. But
all right.
He will be back, and then we get him back in the big chair here, I think, in 2 weeks. But he's coming because he's got a lot of hot takes to unload. And
oh, yeah. He's
chomping
at the bit, as they say.
Yes, and he's itching to forecast, too, because he's missed some severe weather across central Pennsylvania the last couple of weeks. It's been active, not only in the sports that we care about, but in weather as well. So, happy 4th.
Happy 4th.
Great to be with you.
Day.
We are working.
1776, all the mantras you want to hit.
Well, we're going to talk about fireworks today. That is
yeah.
the purpose of this special Independence Day podcast. And as you listen to it, perhaps throughout the week, we're talking about what else? College football. Nothing more American than that, right?
Hey, I mean, apple pie, Chevrolet, something like that.
They say baseball, baseball, hot dogs. Well, we've talked a lot about baseball, and I don't want to talk about baseball because the Phillies just dropped 2 to the Nationals, so...
that was a little lackluster showing there in that series, but hey.
Well, whatever. We're not going to dwell on that today. We are talking college football. But first, if you want to find us, you know how to do it right here. You can always send us an email, weatherwagers@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, meteorologist Brett Thacker and meteorologist Dan Tomaso, at Brett Thack, ABC27 on Twitter and Instagram, and Doppler Dan, there he is, Twitter and Instagram for him. And your Twitter is what?
At Shinetastic17 on all major platforms.
Okay, so we thought, thank you. We wanted to go over, I said to you, let's talk fireworks. And once we hit July 4th, it's a couple of weeks until SEC Media Days and Big Ten Media Days, and then the season craziness really starts to take off. Mm-hmm. So it's a holiday. And folks are going to be celebrating today. They may be back to work later this week. They may listen to this at any point in the next week. And so we wanted to talk about upcoming college football games in the 2023 season that could have fireworks. Now, that's all I told you.
All you said was fireworks, and to interpret it as I felt
necessary. Correct.
Yep.
So I know how I interpreted it, and I'm curious how you interpret it. So you actually sent me, I said pick 5, but you sent 10. So I picked 10 too because you've got 5 kind of honorable mentions and then your top 5 games that feature fireworks. So before we get into it, how did you define fireworks in a college football game?
Well, I kind of thought of it in 2 different ways. One, obviously fireworks, you're thinking about those like big matchups, right? Where like it's going to be a game that has the outcome will lead to a championship or maybe a bowl game or
lots of eyeballs on it,
rivalry, you know. So I was trying to think anything that like you think is just kind of like a game that people are going to get up for. And I kind of looked at it as, like I said, 2 different ways. One, things of the history in the past, and then things that maybe we might not have anymore with the new conference realignments coming up. So maybe it's like the last shot for some of these teams to really see each other on a year-to-year basis.
Well, and rivalries always create fireworks, and some rivalries will go away because of conference realignment. Some rivalries will be renewed.
Yes.
Which is going to be interesting to take a look at. So I wonder where we begin, and you're going to begin with your honorable mentions, and we will pull that up here. Talk to us about your list here. Now, these are in no particular order other than chronological order. So this does not mean that the first one listed you think is going to be the most fireworks. These are just games that you think will provide fireworks for us as a viewing audience. And you start on the 23rd of September with Florida State traveling to Clemson. No time or network yet for that, but explain yourself.
Well, first of all, I think this, looking ahead, might be the best ACC game on the slate for the year.
There aren't many.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, is there a changing of a guard coming here? Florida State is on the up. Clemson, I don't know if we can say they're on the down, but I think Dabo has a lot that he needs to prove this season to show that they are still the big dogs in the ACC.
And actually, you know, I scoffed. I think there's been a bit of a tendency to make fun of the ACC because for a long time it was Clemson and everybody else. And
pretty much, yeah.
Most people viewed Dabo as having a weak schedule. Now, having said that, when he got to the big stage, he performed well.
Yeah.
So even with a weaker schedule, Dabo answered his critics time and time again. However, in recent years, the ACC has been better. I mean, you look at what Mac Brown has done with North Carolina.
Yep.
And Drake May coming back. That's going to be a tough out for teams like Florida State and Clemson. You look at, Clemson always struggles with teams it shouldn't, like Syracuse.
Pitt a couple of years ago. Yep.
Right. So, but if Florida State is as good as people think they are, and by the way, I have my doubts about that.
Yeah.
That's not to say I don't think they'll be good. Can they be a 10 or 11 win team? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're there yet with Mike Norvell, but that's an early season test.
Well, and that's why I deemed it one of those firework games. Because if you think about the ACC, if Clemson wins this game, that's probably their path into the ACC championship.
It's a
or
fast
at least
track.
Possibly a bowl bid.
I think it's a fast track.
A playoff bid.
Could be. Yep.
FSU's got a much harder schedule. They got LSU early on.
Right.
But the fact that this game's so early, I think, really dictates the rest of the season. More for Clemson than it does Florida State, but it would be that win for Florida State to get them on the map, depending on what happened with them and LSU.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think if Florida State would come back and win the ACC, I don't think the LSU game would matter then that much. I agree with your take on this because Dabo Swinney's at a critical juncture. I still think Clemson is viewed as Clemson.
Oh, yeah.
But if they don't have a very good year this year again, look out. I think there's got to be, is Clemson still one of those elite teams, or are they just a very good program? That's the difference. And the good news for them is they get Florida State at home. So that's a tough road test. If Florida State wants to be back to where they want to be, they need to win that game too. Good choice. Okay,
right.
We move into October next, and you've got the Red River Shootout in Dallas, the Red River rivalry. Now this, of course,
showdown.
Right? Yeah,
depending on how you want to do it. Yes,
it won't be the last time this game is played. They're both moving to the SEC. This is an ABC game. It's TBD. It's going to be at noon.
Yep.
Your thoughts on why this game matters this year, especially with Oklahoma having a down year last year?
Well, I think, first of all, since 2010, Oklahoma has dominated this series 10-4. Okay, so I think a lot of this is pride on Texas. Is Texas back? All that fun stuff.
Well, we've heard it for the last 10 years. I mean, is this the year that we should care?
Well, I think the big thing about this is Texas destroyed Oklahoma last year, 49-0.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So the firework implication here is, can Oklahoma make it a game, and is Texas back? And just because it is the good old Red River rivalry, shootout, showdown, whatever, that game always brings its own kind of fireworks.
And who's going to be best poised to do well in the SEC? I think most of us would say Texas right now. But again, the season hasn't been played yet. So
correct.
Brent Venables recruiting well. Like I said in an earlier podcast, I don't think he's forgotten how to coach.
No.
So if he can turn his program around, some people think Texas could win the Big 12 on their way out of it. Could be an interesting game. And remember, these are just Shiner's honorable mentions.
Correct. We haven't even hit the big boys yet.
Correct. So let's go to number 3 here, USC at Notre Dame. Again, a classic helmet game.
Exactly.
USC, when I look at this game, and this is my live reaction to it here, seeing what you picked, defense. Lincoln Riley, not known for it. It's cost him several shots at a playoff and several playoff games. Notre Dame, what is Notre Dame going to be this year? So what are your thoughts on why this game could have fireworks?
Well, I think, one, the history. I mean, they've played this game 93 times. Okay, so obviously it's
look at you doing the research.
You try to get on the notepad here every now and then and give you some stats. But
yes,
this is going to be the last game before USC does make the transition to the Big Ten. Now, I believe they are going to keep this game intact throughout the other years. I mean, it's such a classic. How could you not? All the way back to the tush push and well before that.
That would be the Bush push, not the tush push.
The tush push was the NFL. They just tried to outlaw. But
right.
It's the Bush push on the tush.
By the way, with USC moving to the Big Ten, this will make it easier when Notre Dame finally does.
But I think I
just said that to tick off the Notre Dame people.
Of course. All right.
Okay, but as you were.
4 of the last 5, I believe, have been won by Notre Dame. But USC did win last year 38-27. So, one, I think is USC as good as we think they are? And where is Notre Dame going to be, let alone, this is a big rivalry with the gold helmets and the Trojans on the side,
It is a big one, and this year it's at Notre Dame. I think everybody wants to expect more from Marcus Freeman this year because he did win some big games, including beating Clemson, the Clemson team that you just talked about, needing to have a bounce back. So can they win a big game like this on their own turf? Is Marcus Freeman the young phenom that everybody thinks he is? I mean, again, lost to a terrible Stanford team last year. They lost to Marshall.
Yeah.
They dropped some games that they shouldn't. And if they win those two games, I think we're talking about Notre Dame as a playoff team this year. So let's see what happens with that game. It's certainly an interesting one.
Yep.
Next up, October 21st. Now this game, it's an honorable mention. I think there could be fireworks here. It's the rematch. Always the winners get cigars, and Tennessee got to smoke their cigars last year for the first time in over a decade. Alabama's going to be out for blood in this one in Tuscaloosa. Why do you think this could produce some fireworks?
Well, first of all, I had to put it on the honorable mention just because, I mean, this is a big game. And I didn't want to, go all chalk with like the big matchups from last year, but it is the rivalry.
Yeah.
Obviously.
It was a classic.
The third Saturday in October means something again.
Yep.
So that's a big thing. And Tennessee has never won back-to-back games against a Nick Saban coached team.
Yeah, in fact, they've hardly won any games.
Exactly. So this is, I think,
the Nick Saban team.
This is one, I think, Nick and the boys trying to get some retribution maybe. And, hey, can Tennessee stay on this run? I hate to have it as an honorable mention, but I had some other ones that just meant a little more. And we were playing a little chicken because I didn't know what you were picking either. So I didn't know if this was going to be on your slate or not.
I have a feeling it is.
Okay,
because think about how classic this game was last year.
Yeah.
Tennessee,
Points aplenty.
they were and are just a classic college football program, right?
Of course.
The checkerboard at Neyland Stadium.
Old Rocky Top.
Yeah, Rocky Top. I mean, when you think of college football, Tennessee is in the annals of that sport. And they've, for the last 15 years, been down the well. They've been floundering. They had to live through Derek Dooley. They had to live through Butch Jones. And then they finally get their man in Josh Heupel. And everybody's going to be like, okay, can he do his brand of football in the SEC? He was successful for a time. We know he's got a good offensive mind. And all of a sudden, comes out last year, turns Hendon Hooker into a Heisman candidate had he not gotten injured.
Unfortunate for sure.
They go 10-2, and one of those wins is against Bama.
Yeah.
And
they come few and far between against that squad.
So now they go back to Tuscaloosa, and again, Nick Saban, he doesn't want to lose to a team twice. He's going to have his club ready. But I just have a feeling Josh Heupel's not just going to go into Tuscaloosa and say, okay, Nick's going to win, moving on. That game, I think, is going to have plenty of fireworks. It did last year. Your final honorable mention, and again, this one it may make my list too. How can it not?
Yep.
Ohio State at Michigan, big noon, Fox, Thanksgiving weekend, rivalry Saturday. I mean, 2-0 the last 2 years for Michigan.
Yep.
Ryan Day on the hot seat. I'm just going to say it. Could you imagine if he loses 3 in a row?
I
wouldn't care, but
no, exactly. But I mean, this is the game that everybody kind of stars at the end of the season. It took a little hiatus there in the mid 2000s, but obviously Ohio State and Michigan are two of the top 5 teams, at least in the views of the early polls. And I mean, how can you not have this on your list? The big thing about this is, one, is it going to come down to who ends up being the Big Ten regular season champ to get into the Big Ten championship game? And what are the implications for our team, Penn State? Because depending on how their schedule goes, the outcome of this game may directly reflect on where Penn State ends at the end of the year, whether it be for playoff contention, a Big Ten title game, whatever. It's one of the few, I think, that actually have a lot more bearing on the team that we like than the ones that are playing, because they could both be undefeated coming up into this, and it's just winner gets in. Maybe the loser still gets a shot at the playoff.
Right.
know?
And if Penn State wants this game to matter, it's going to have to beat one or both of them.
Exactly.
And
that's what we want to see.
We do want to see it. I'm just, again, until I see it, I think, and I'm not alone, I'm not going to believe it until I could actually see it.
And
but
a lot of talk about how Ohio State's going to be down this year. I don't know how much, if that's just fodder or what, but, I mean, they're obviously replacing a key quarterback. They still have these recruiting classes that are basically second to Alabama and Georgia, and that's it.
Right, they're in that elite club. So, but having said that, Michigan is not in the elite club when it comes to they're recruiting. Now,
Correct.
they have Michigan has developed players, and they have a fantastic O-line.
Mm-hmm.
They have something that Penn State has, two great running backs coming back,
Yep.
and they have a quarterback coming back that played very well last year.
Mm-hmm.
So even though their recruiting isn't up into that elite category, they have found a way under Jim Harbaugh to become winners. And I mean, Ohio State saying they're down is like saying Bama's going to be
Exactly.
down. So this game has all the markings of another classic.
Yep.
You just hope Penn State can play spoiler to one or both of their seasons before that game.
Yeah.
And that's, to your point, we'll see what happens by the end of November. So those are your honorable mentions. Let me go to mine now.
Yep.
And you can react to these here in real time. I'm going to go. Actually, I have three on the same date. Now, I did not plan this. Now, these are just honorable mentions, but Penn State at Illinois. And the reason that I think this is going to bring some fireworks, that's big noon on Fox.
Yep.
It's Penn State's opener, again, on the road in the Big Ten.
Yet again.
James Franklin and Pat Kraft, not happy about that.
Yeah.
But Brett Bielema, we all remember the 9 OT game where they came into our house and won that game. This is going to be the first real test of the season, in my opinion, for Penn State.
Yep.
Now, look, it's a road game. It's noontime. Sleepy Champaign, Illinois.
Uh-oh.
I just think, and Bielema is going to come out, and I've seen this before. I love James Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
I love Penn State. A lot of finesse on that sideline, okay?
Yep.
Now, got the O-line working last year. We had the running backs working last year, but we've got our new quarterback, first Big Ten road game.
The first true test he's going to have.
Correct.
Yep.
And you've got Brett Bielema that wants to just pound you into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And you better be tough. I don't know that we can out-tough Brett Bielema on the road. Talent-wise, yes, we're better.
You've
you and
had
I
this
know.
Circled for a while now. We've been talking about it for a couple months ever since it was on the schedule.
It just has the hallmarks of a nail-biter game that shouldn't.
Are you expecting a letdown here? It seems like you're
No,
you're leaning
I am
that
expecting. I would expect a 17-point Penn State win.
Okay.
But on those but when I do, we have struggled. That's my point. So I'm trying to get ahead of that. So I just think keep an eye on that. There could be some fireworks there, and fireworks meaning that again Bielema's O-line is just going to push over our D-line.
Yep.
But Manny Diaz wasn't here the last time we played them.
Very true. Very true.
South Carolina at Georgia. Now, this game, again, it's an honorable mention. This game could very easily wind up being all Georgia. But the reason that I have this on here is if we look, and we have on this podcast, we've looked at Georgia's cupcake schedule. And this is a game, because of how dominant Georgia is, that can easily get glossed over. But this is a rivalry that means a lot to both teams.
Oh, yeah.
Now, again, it's between the hedges, so that may be all she wrote right there. But keep in mind what Shane Beamer has done. Mm-hmm. Shane Beamer beat Tennessee, the Tennessee team that
kind of ruined their whole season.
Correct, that we just talked about beating Alabama. He beat Clemson to end the year, and then he's been recruiting very well. And I think that it's really cupcake until Georgia gets into November and has to go to Tennessee. Mm-hmm. This is the only other game that would raise an eyebrow in their schedule early in the year. And I think Shane Beamer knows and has been planning since bowl season about how to attack Kirby Smart in Georgia. Remember, they have Rattler at quarterback.
Yep.
Stranger things have happened.
Hey, if you got a gunslinger that wants to shine in his moment, I mean, that's what these games are all about.
Correct. So, listen, it could end up being 48-0, and it wouldn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying to keep an eye on that one. Same date, September 16th, there could be some fireworks. Mm-hmm. This is an honorable mention to me because I don't care about either team. Mm-hmm. I also don't think this game is going to matter at all nationally. I think West Virginia is terrible, mm-hmm. And I think Pitt is okay. Pat Narduzzi comes and goes with the talent on that team, but it is, for the love of God, the backyard brawl.
True.
And it means something, and it's just usually a bloody, nasty rivalry. It's nice to have it back. Remember,
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's in the ACC.
Took about an 11-year hiatus, did it not?
Right, and it came back last year, but this is a prime time Fowler and Herbie game.
Yep.
So, or at least it should be. I bet you they'll be there. It doesn't always mean they're there. But
I have a feeling we might bring this up a little later, too.
West Virginia, they're going to be burning couches, right, in Morgantown.
If you've never been to Morgantown, I always say you should do it once. And like I said, we might discuss this a little later because I may have frequented the Morgantown football experience. And I have some good stories to go with that.
I believe you did. This is somewhat of a family podcast.
Well, we'll keep it PG. All right.
Yes, because I know some. I know some of those stories.
Yes.
But that is.
It's a good rivalry to have back for sure.
The college football world wants that game played.
Of course.
So and again, when I say I don't care about those teams, what I mean is nationally they're irrelevant. But listen, I care about college football, and I'm going to be watching that game. I mean, I care about any college football that's played anytime, and that game means something, and it's going to be fun to have them back.
For sure.
10-14, Oregon and Washington. Now, this is one of those two that I think there's going to be some fireworks here because these are the two teams outside of USC that could win the Pac-12. And these are the two teams, too, that may want to leave the Pac-12 and go to the Big Ten. And Washington gets to host. Getting Oregon out of Eugene is always critical. I think they're more vulnerable away from the Quack Shack.
Yeah.
And you get them into the Huskies environment. And again, what Washington has been able to do with Michael Penix, and Oregon's always going to be tough. Listen, I lines aren't out for that game yet. I think that one could be fun.
Oh, yeah. I just hope it's not played at 10 o'clock at night or a 7 o'clock start on the West Coast.
Well, I think it probably...
That's the problem with a lot of the Pac-12 games. We don't get to see them on the East Coast, I think, with as much of a... We just don't get to dive in as much. You're more of a highlight reel than you are getting into the game, just because of the time.
Well, there was a time, maybe 20 years ago, where I could do it. I could stay up that late. We're a little older now.
A little bit.
And so, by halftime of the primetime games, I'm out. But I think this is going to be a fun game in mid-October. And the other thing is, what could always come into play with a game like this? What do we talk about on this podcast all the time?
Weather.
Yeah. Weather. Always tough in Seattle and in Washington in mid-October. You could get a misty, cold day that's going to throw both teams off. Now, let's talk ACC, another honorable mention. I think you'll find this one interesting. North Carolina, again, has to go to Clemson. Clemson gets a lot of its tough ACC games at home.
Favorable schedule.
Which is why, if you like their talent, and, I from what I'm hearing, Dabo likes his defense this year. Really. He thinks they're back to being a championship-level defense. He's going to get a chance to prove it here on November 18th against Drake May, North Carolina, and Mac Brown. And again, North Carolina is one of those teams, everybody talks them up preseason, and then they're usually good to blow it once or twice, and then they're out of it. But you don't think Mac Brown wants to go in and beat Clemson at home?
Oh, of course.
And the thing is,
you got the Carolina bragging rights going on, I mean.
Right. And I don't care if Mac Brown lost 3 games by this point. He can still do it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What's your take on that game?
I think this is kind of the bookend to my ACC matchup. Is if Clemson can keep their nose clean against Florida State, this might be the clincher for them at the end of the season. So they kind of have their hardest games on the beginning and the end of their season, which is interesting. You don't normally have that unless it's an out-of-conference game or something.
Well, and again, they will have to play their rival South Carolina to close it all up. But at that point, the ACC...
But you got to be clean up until that game.
Of course, yeah, you do, and especially if you're trying to be a playoff team. All right, we don't have a drum roll sound effect, do we?
I don't.
Okay, well, then you know what? Let's cue up the next best thing. Well, first of all, by the time the season rolls around, I want you to find a drum roll.
Okay.
Okay, mark that down. We need a drum roll.
Got it.
But rev up the motorcycle. That's the closest college football sound we have. Listen to that baby purr. Listen to that Bobby. Listen to that Bobby purr.
Yes, sir.
These are your top 5 games with fireworks next season, and we start with one of my honorable mentions, the backyard brawl.
Yeah, and the reason that this is a firework game to me, and I alluded to it earlier, is I've been to Morgantown for a football game.
Against Pitt?
I've been to a game against Pitt and a game against Virginia Tech in the late 90s, early 2000s. Got to see the Michael Vick experience, the Mark Bolger experience,
and a backyard brawl.
And a backyard brawl.
Okay.
But the thing about Morgantown, and you know this story, I have been to a game at Morgantown. I was woken up by the Beautiful People soundtrack playing in the middle of a dorm room.
Yeah.
Everybody gets into a school bus at 6 a.m., which is loaded with soda pop. And you drive to the field, and you start at 6 a.m., not too different from a normal tailgate situation.
They call it pop out there, don't they?
I believe it is pop and gum bands and all that stuff.
But there wasn't soda pop.
But the big thing about this is I've never been to a tailgate where, one, shotguns have been fired in the air pregame, and no one thinks that's weird.
No,
I mean, maybe it happens other places, but someone would
Oklahoma.
take it for cover.
Remember the Corso
Exactly.
experience? But,
so
yeah,
that was
happened.
One thing.
Okay.
And then my greatest college football experience ever was
Be careful
a friend
now.
of a friend.
Be careful here.
His grandmother was here tailgating with us, and there was a bottle, which you actually referenced a couple podcasts ago, of George Dickel whiskey.
Yes.
And that was being passed around, and it was complimentary, and you were supposed to take your swig. Now, one of these fine young co-eds was parking on it a little too long to where his grandmother said to
Be careful.
his grandson, do I need to put a nipple on that? With some other choice words. But I have never heard anyone say a whiskey bottle needs a nipple.
Well, was she calling him a baby?
Maybe. He wasn't quite hitting the bottle hard enough, if you will. But my point is, West Virginia Mountaineers, they know how to do it out in the parking lots, and it's always an exciting time. And yes, couches will be burned.
This is going to be the first backyard brawl there in over a decade, because
Correct.
remember, it was last year it was at Pitt. So imagine the level of the frenzied level of excitement.
Yeah.
The amount of George Dickel whiskey that will be consumed.
It'll be around. And
the amount of shotguns that will be fired.
It's possible. And the big thing, too, is, I mean, this did come back after a 10-year break, and it was a close game last year. It was 38-31 Pitt. So I feel those Mountaineers are going to be a little fired up. And we talk about rivalries. I mean, whether these two teams are ever in the national conversation, these two fan bases do not like each other. They say, well, we'll clean it up, defecate on Pitt.
Yes.
And
yes.
West Virginia, I believe you have to have a heartbeat to get in. So I've heard both commentary from the sidelines.
They are nasty.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, again, you think about the fiercest rivalries like Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee.
Anytime you can give a name to the matchup, like the backyard brawl, you just know that they're ready to play.
I will say that, first of all, the one thing that may take the sheen up, West Virginia is already going to have a loss.
We hope.
Right?
Week 1? Yep.
But you can't beat it. Mid-September, backyard brawl, primetime, ABC.
Yep.
Next up, September 30th, you've got the Jerry World Bowl. Jimbo, Sam Pittman. Why this game of all of the games that Texas A&M will play?
I think it speaks for itself.
There it is.
We know our guy's coming back, right?
Bobby P.
Mm-hmm. He's coming back. Yep. Now, I don't know how he's going to be regarded coming back to his old stomping grounds in Arkansas, but I think, one, if I am a Texas A&M fan, I'm going to have, those big fat heads that you make of people's faces?
Yep.
I'm getting the neck braces. I'm putting them on all of my people. I'm getting the red-faced
the press
Bobby,
conference. Yep.
And I'm going to town in the stands just to let Bobby know, hey, you're back.
You got to have a motorcycle, like a blow-up motorcycle there. And
some kind of, like we said, the motorcycle cart where you need it, So it's more the homecoming of Bobby Petrino than anything else. I think that's what the fireworks are for me.
That is a great point. That is a phenomenal point.
I just wish it wasn't at a neutral site.
Well,
a
right.
little bit.
Because, again, the great Mike Leach, we had a tribute to him here last year.
Yep.
Unfortunately, no longer with us, but he said when you play in Fayetteville, the south end zone is so loud. Everything echoes off of there. Oh, 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 oh. And he did this impression of how it echoed off of that south end zone. Could you imagine the screaming that would take place? And that's why I hate neutral site games.
Yeah.
And what makes this one especially putrid is that it's at Jerry World.
Yeah, you're kind of commercializing it a little too much up there.
Correct. All right, let's move on. We've got LSU at Bama. Now, this one is another rematch, and you think this one's going to have some fireworks.
Well, and that's why I picked this one over the Tennessee-Alabama, because I didn't want to go, everybody needs to rematch Alabama because they're always supposed to win. But this one, I think just because of the way it ended last year with the 1-point win in overtime, okay, you also have the Kelly-Saban dynamic here, which
there's a little rivalry
up until
there.
last year, Kelly is, I believe, 0-2 against Saban, lifetime.
Right, and this now he's 1-2, and this would make him even, wouldn't it?
Now, this is what's very interesting to me, and just like a little side note, who has more career wins, Saban or Kelly?
Probably Kelly.
He does. 290 to 281. Now, that's saying a lot because Saban was away from college football for, I think, 6 years
and
total.
Let's not forget, Brian Kelly has won a championship at every level except for this one.
Correct.
He was, I think, was he Grand Valley State for a while?
Grand Valley State, yeah. He had some D2.
Correct.
Like a national championship.
Yep.
I just thought that was super interesting because when you think of
Nick Saban
and the fact that Kelly is 10 years younger than Saban, but you got to remember the NFL experience. And
Kelly's been in college.
Some time off, and Kelly's been in college the whole time. So I just thought that was interesting. It's more of like a legacy game maybe between these guys and a re-heightened rivalry outside of the Notre Dame aspect of it from the national championship matchup they had a little while back. But, hey, anytime you get LSU and Alabama on the same field, there's going to be fireworks, and this is going to be no different, even in Bama's home turf.
Well, right, and this is again an equal to Saban in my opinion. Two great coaches. Kirby is equal, and when I say equal, I don't mean overall. Nick Saban's body of work speaks for itself. I'm not an idiot. My point is right now, who is coaching at a very high level like Nick Saban? Well, Kirby Smart is.
Yep.
For a while, Dabo, right? Still have to put him
Even
there.
Brian Kelly had a great run there.
Correct, and Brian Kelly got Notre Dame into the playoff and into the championship. So I put Brian Kelly right up there.
Yep.
And he just beat him last year. So, this is a chess match, essentially. Then you've got a Pac-12 game here in your top 5, USC at Oregon. Is this going to be for the Pac-12?
Well, and I think that is the firework implication, but it's also, as we stated last time, USC is going to be in the Pac-12. Now, I know USC and Oregon, they don't play every year, but the fact that this could be a Pac-12 championship bid or game versus what it might be in a year or two from now, a Rose Bowl matchup, I think just seems really weird to me. I'm still not dialed into this USC-UCLA Big Ten partnership, but I think it's going to be the bragging rights for who goes out as the perennial winner here in the Pac-12. And for a while, Oregon was the cream of the crop. USC's had the uptick here in the last year or two.
Well, no doubt, and now they've upgraded their coach. You have to think Oregon with the former Georgia DC as its head coach Dan Lanning is going to be again poised to be good. Remember, they got blown out by Georgia at the start of last season.
Yep.
And then made a run.
Yeah.
And made a very good run.
Turned it around. Yep.
I like your pick here because, I don't know if there'll be defense played, although Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator. There is going to be a lot of fireworks, and it'll be their last matchup potentially for a while, unless Oregon moves to the Big Ten.
Yeah.
All right, your fifth and final firework game, big noon.
Yep, and
Michigan, Penn State.
I would put this as my number 1 overall seed. Obviously, being a little bit of a homer here with being a Penn State fan, but the big thing about this is if we think Michigan is as good as they are, and we think Penn State is as good as they should be, this should be a Big Ten championship game, at least to determine who the Big Ten championship game bid is. But the biggest part of this, one, in-state college, But with the new setup here, starting in 2024, Michigan will potentially not be back at State College till 26 or later.
Yeah, it's going to be a while.
Now I
because
know
they
have a
rotate in
game
and out.
2025 in Michigan, but I don't know if that's part of the play too, or they also don't have those schedules outside
Right.
conferences set up right now.
This
So
could be
there's
the
a
last
potential
time
this
we
could be
host
a last
Michigan
time. Exactly.
in a long
in a big
time. Yep.
So it's a shame it's a
Fair
big
point.
noon kickoff. We would love this to be the whiteout. Obviously, Michigan and Penn State have sort of been flip-flopping here for a while. Michigan's got us the last 2 years. We got them 2 years in a row prior to that. And then it was a home-away winner for each of us. And this rivalry's always kind of been a little lopsided outside of the 2021 game, where I believe it was just a late second touchdown that had to win by a field goal, I believe.
Yeah.
Or 4 points, something like that. So I think this is more for the Penn State side of things. Like, hey, let's give Michigan one last go at it in case we don't see him here for a couple of years.
One last send-off to remember us by, because, again, they're going to be a very tough out.
Yeah.
If Drew Aller is who we think that he is, and if our O-line and running backs come through, this is still going to be a very tough environment for Jim Harbaugh to play in.
Yep.
But he's done it before. He's beaten us at home before.
He has.
So can we actually, this year with the talent that we have, beat them and put ourselves in pretty good positioning in the Big Ten East? I like your picks.
Hey.
I mean, they're very good. All right, now let's ready for
See
mine.
what you got.
Because
I'm
you're
ready.
going to be maybe surprised by some, but not
Okay.
not many. I'm going with some of the games that we've discussed here already. The first one is right on Labor Day weekend. Now, this is Sunday night, primetime. It's got its own window, live from Orlando, LSU, Florida State. And the reason why I think that this game is going to have fireworks is, remember, it was a 1-point loss for Brian Kelly last year.
Yep.
Florida State won. Both teams projected to be very good. Well, I ultimately don't think that this game will matter too terribly much. If LSU wins the SEC West again, even last year it didn't matter. If they had beaten Georgia, they were going to the playoff.
Exactly.
If Florida State wins the ACC and they have one loss or fewer, they're going to the playoff. But I think that what this will do is tell us about each team.
It's a good identifier game early on in the slate, and I think we'll finally know what we're dealing with both teams.
Correct. It's going to give us a nice preview. And for me, it's more about Florida State. Are they? And I know they won last year, but boy, if they come out and beat them this year, boy, I will be keeping a close eye on them.
Yeah.
They may be as good as advertised. Then I've got USC at Notre Dame. Some of the same reasons you did. I want to see this matchup played in South Bend, and for me, it's a measuring stick game against for Notre Dame against a top 10 program, a program that could have made the playoff last year had they not had to play Utah.
Yeah.
They had to play Utah twice. They lost twice. If they didn't have to play that game, they would have been in the playoffs. So
For sure.
that's a primetime game in the mid-October, and it's a helmet game, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, you
we-
take this back to the 60s, 70s, the biggest names in the game.
It's fantastic. I am going to put Tennessee at Alabama on here. I am so looking.
Worthy. It's worthy.
It's July 4th. I wish October 21st was tomorrow. That's how much I am hoping and rooting for this game to come back. It was such an instant classic, and I think Nick Saban and the boys will be salivating to welcome Josh Heupel back not back, but into Tuscaloosa and show him maybe turnabout is fair play.
Quick question. What kind of a line do you think you would put on that game? Obviously, we know nothing going on. It's deeper in the season. But if you were to put a line on it right now.
Alabama by 10.
Okay. That was going to be my question. Do they get a double-digit line?
Yeah, I think
home?
so. I think so. Now,
It's hard
again,
not to.
it's hard not to because it's almost built in. They get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Hendon Hooker is gone. Now, I'm hearing, again, very good things about Milton's arm from Tennessee. We'll see. And, by the way, Josh Heupel has a quarterback. Nick Saban doesn't.
Correct.
So we've talked about Alabama's question marks, but
He'll find a 5-star somewhere.
they're out there.
They're plentiful.
Just look around Tuscaloosa. They'll fall out of the sky. Here's a game now. Let me ask you this before I bring up on 11/11 Veterans Day, Texas at TCU. But before I comment on this game, neither one of us, and I don't know if we were avoiding the obvious here, neither one of us had I was going to say the A&M Texas game, but that's not until the following year. So I was looking at the schedule, going, okay, they're not that game will have fireworks when it gets back on the schedule. But what team is Texas going to play this year? That they're one of the top 10 programs. People think that they can win the Big 12. I went away from the obvious. Now I know you picked the Red River Shootout, and I thought your reasoning was great. But remember, Texas's new Texas A&M has been TCU. TCU has just whipped up on Texas something fierce in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Gary Patterson, when he was the coach, he hated Texas, wanted to stick it to them. They think they're better than everybody else. We're just little old TCU. Yep.
Horns down.
Horns down. Horns down, And so all of a sudden now, who has been to the national title game? Okay.
Frogs?
Yeah. They've been there before Texas got back to it. They were just there last year. Now, it was an embarrassment. I understand that.
But they got there.
But the program itself has been on better footing than Texas. They're the little engine that could. They hate Texas. Texas doesn't want to hear about it. It is a fun rivalry that has developed, and this is the last time they're going to play for a while. Texas goes into TCU. I think of all the games I've picked, look out. There's going to be fireworks there.
Yeah, hopefully some defense shows up, and we'll see what happens. But, TCU has earned the respect that they did last year, and I think a lot of people have question marks on whether that was, I don't want to say a fluky season, but everything kind of just fell in the right ways, even down to the Baylor game, that kept them
right
in the championship look, because I believe they were pushing on late against Oklahoma State, and there was a last-second play to make it all happen. It was stopped on the goal line. It
was wild stuff.
If that game has a different outcome, we might not even be talking about TCU.
I'm telling you, this game means everything, especially to TCU. And it doesn't matter what type of season they're having. They want to beat the Longhorns.
And they're your straight-up blue-collar kind of team, too, aren't they?
Well, yeah, because they're the little brother. Exactly. They have that. They're the Michigan State.
Got to work harder.
Yeah.
Not with the same talent level.
They're the Michigan State of Texas.
Yep.
Okay? And because of that, I mean, listen, if they beat Texas, that's it. Texas is on to the SEC. They get the last word. I mean, it's going to be people. This stuff matters.
It does, and it's truly a firework type situation. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Correct. So Ohio State at Michigan, noontime Fox, 11:25. That is Thanksgiving weekend, and nothing more needs to be said about it. The only thing I will say is I certainly hope both of them have a loss. I think that's a wish fulfillment. It doesn't matter, though, if they do or they don't. This game means everything to those two programs. It doesn't need to be said. The one thing that I think should be said, though, is, again, to set the narrative. And whether Ohio State wants to admit it or not, if Michigan wins this year, no matter what their records are, I think Ryan Day is toast.
Wow.
They do not want
because of the Michigan loss.
Yes, because you do.
Franklin survived it.
Franklin's not. Franklin. These teams are
Coach
not
of
our
Ohio
rivals.
State.
Correct. These teams are not our rivals, and we have not been on the same level as them. Especially Ohio State. Listen,
there's a lot of chat about how Day was handed this team too. Starting on third base, I believe was the quote.
And I think here's the deal: if they had beaten Georgia at the stroke of midnight, had that field goal gone through, conversation's over.
Yeah,
doesn't matter. Fact of the matter is they didn't. They expect national titles at Ohio State. They expect Big Ten titles. Jim Harbaugh has completely flipped the narrative, and if he wins 3 in a row, they don't want a John Cooper situation. They don't want what happened in the 90s under John Cooper. They won a lot of games, didn't beat Michigan. And it just developed into this, the rivalry then was flipped around. And Jim Tressel came in, completely flipped it around. And then they hired Urban, and for 2 decades it was all Ohio State. Now Jim Harbaugh. I know it's only been 2 years. Doesn't matter. They don't want to go anymore.
Yeah, I anytime I think about this game, a little while back, ESPN had a great commercial, and it was a couple sitting on the couch, canoodling, if you will.
Yeah.
And one had an Ohio State sweater on, one had a Michigan sweater, and it said, "This is only discussing because of sports."
Well, right.
So we know this rivalry.
It brings
we know
people
the
together.
matchup.
It tears them apart.
Fireworks all ready for it.
And that's, the same thing can be said about the Iron Bowl and about USC Notre Dame and about
A
so
lot
many.
of ones we left off here that are classic yearly matchups. But
Correct.
We
only had 5, and then we extended it to 10 with a few honorable mentions. So what a great podcast. We hope this puts you in the patriotic spirit. College football is just around the corner, and these are games we expect fireworks from next season. So let's take you through here. If you want to find us again, Dan will be back with us next week. We're excited to welcome him back. Dave, as always, you did a great job helping me out steer this ship for the last several weeks. Weatherwagers@gmail.com. There are our social media channels. Again, meteorologist Brett Thacker and Dan Tomaso on Facebook, @Doppler Dan. Give him a shout-out and some love on Twitter and Instagram. And I'm Brett Thack, ABC27 on Twitter and Instagram as well. So that's going to do it for us. Quick shot of us here. David, thanks for pinch hitting here these last several weeks. Appreciate you.
Happy birthday, America.
Amen. Happy July 4th, everybody. Enjoy it.